Recorded on December 16th, 1966, in New York.
अवतार है कृष्ण सर्वविध प्रकार, पुरुषावतार एक, लीलावतार आठ, गुणावतार और मन्नांतर अवतार, युगावतार और सप्तावतार. Now, we have been discussing about incarnations. These incarnations are concerned so far the maintenance of the material world is required. In the spiritual world there is no incarnation. There is a permanent situation of the spiritual planets, and in different planets Krishna has different expansions under different symbolic representation, and they are differently named. There is no change. But in the material world, when we speak of incarnation, that is in relationship with this material world. For the material world, these incarnations are expanded. And what are they? First the Purusha avatar, then Leela avatar, then Guna avatar, 3, then Mannantara avatar, 4, then Yuga avatar, 5, and then Saktavesh avatar. So, these incarnations are manifested at different times according to the need. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita it is stated, Jada jadahi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamam. There is a system in the process of this material world. There is a system, just like for maintenance of your state, United States, there is a system of government, and there is an aim. Just like your government does not like that there should be no communistic persons. And you write that we trust in God. It is better to trust in God. We have got a system. Similarly, the maintenance of the whole material world, there is a system. It is not blind. Foolish creatures, they think that everything has come out of nothing and it is being managed by nature. No, behind nature there is God. In the Bhagavad Gita I have learned, Maya dhakkena pragiti swati sacharacharam. Under my superintendence, the material nature is working. Material nature is not blind. Just like foolish person, because he cannot see President Johnson and the governmental personalities, they think it is going on. Nobody is there behind this government, and it is going on. So similarly, persons who have no knowledge in the affairs of this material world, they think that this material nature is working, and automatically by magic the sun is coming out, the moon is coming out, and the season is changing, and everything is going on just like magic, and we are the master of everything. Never think, these foolish persons never think that they are not masters, they are servant of the material nature. So, that is their foolishness. Therefore, when there is too much foolishness, so there is need of avatar, incarnation, to correct. Jada jadahi dharmasya glani bhavati. Whenever there is, discrepancies in the maintenance of law and order of this material nature, there is need of avatar, incarnation. because it is God's kingdom. It is also secondary kingdom, real kingdom in the spiritual world. So, God comes in different avatars. And when the material world is created, the first avatar is Purusha avatar. The Mahavishnu, Garbhodosha, they create. And then Leela avatar. Leela avatar, under some particular circumstances, to save some particular devotee or to display some particular feature, just like Lord Rama incarnate. He is Leela avatar. Then Guna avatar. So for maintenance of this material world, there are different kinds of modes of nature. And to control those modes of nature, there are avatars, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. Leela avatar. Then Manvantara avatar, that changes, millenniums, that Manna avatar. And then Juga avatar. Juga avatar, in each and every Juga, just like this Kali Juga. This is called Kali Juga. In the Kali Juga, the incarnation is Lord Chaitanya. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavata. There is a chapter, Navajogendra, 9 great mystics met one very powerful king, and they explained, each and every one of them, they explained about spiritual things. And there was a transcendentalist among them. Amongst the 9 personalities, there was one whose name was Chamas Muni. The Chamas Muni said, that is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when he was asked by Videha, Maharaj, King Videha, so what is the avatar of this Kali Yuga? Special. Then he mentioned, Krishna Varnam Tisha Krishna Shangapangas Parthadam Jagain Sankirtanai Prayi Jajanti Hismedasa. Now, in this age of Kali Yuga, there will be avatar, incarnation, who is Krishna. But his color of the body is not black. That is Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was very fair complexion, nice looking. Krishna Varnam Tisha, by complexion he is not Krishna, but he is Krishna. So Krishna Varnam Tisha Krishna and Shangapangasya Parsadam, and is associated by his confidential, devotees. He'll find Lord Chaitanya always crowded by his devotees, always. He's dancing more, you have seen the picture, and special associates that Advaita, Gadadhar, Nityananda. So, that incarnation, who is Krishna, but his color, his complexion is not black, but he is associated with devotees. And the process of worshipping that incarnation is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. So, in this Yuga, in this Kali Yuga, the incarnation is Lord Chaitanya, and the process of worship is the sound vibration. That is mentioned. In every avatar, every incarnation, just like Lord Buddha, his name is also mentioned. And there will be another incarnation, Kalki, that is also mentioned. So they are mentioned, the Yuga and Saptavesh avatar. Saptavesh avatar, all avatar, their mission is to preach the message of God. Avatar has no other business. The message of God. Saptavesh avatar, this Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This is also considered Saptavesh avatar. It is incarnation of sound. Incarnation of sound. It is described by Lord Chaitanya that Kali Kale Nam Rupe Avatar. In this Kali Yuga, in this age, this incarnation of name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, to give facility to the conditioned soul. They cannot do anything. It is very difficult to perform any other religious rituals. This is the best. Anywhere, everywhere, you can chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sattva Shakti. Shakti, this word is used, Shakti. And from Shakti, that energy, Saktavesh-avatar. So, this name is also Saktavesh-avatar. বাল্য পৌগণ্ড হয় বিগ্রহের ধর্ম এত রূপে লীলা করেন ব্রজেন্দ্রনন্দ. And when Krishna personally comes, he can be seen in two features, Balya Pauganda, his childhood and boyhood, up to 16th year. That is the real feature of Krishna, Kishore. And for that feature, there is expansion of Krishna, Vasudeva. Vasudeva Sarvami. अनंत अवतार कृष्ण नाहिक गणन शाखा चंद्र नायकरी दिग्दर्शन अवतार जसंख्या हरे सत्य निधि दिजा तथा अभिदासीन कुल्या सरसस्सु सहस्रश. Now he is concluding about the topics of incarnation, that there are innumerable incarnations of Krishna. Nobody can count. He is giving the example, just like nobody can count how many waves are flowing in the river or in the ocean. Similarly, it is impossible to count how many incarnations are there. प्रथमे करे कृष्ण पुरुषावतार सहित पुरुषाय त्रिगुण प्रताप. The first avatar, first incarnation is the Purusha avatar. He divides himself into three. This is stated in the Vishnu Purana. Vishnustu trini rupani purushakshan natho vidhu ekantu mahatasastu dvitiya tadanda sanskritam tritiyang sarvabhutastang tani gyatva vimuchyate. Tani gyatva vimuchyate. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, we have read that Janma karmam me dibbam jo janati tattata takta deham punarjanma naiti mameti kaunteya. Anyone who understands about the appearance and disappearance of God or His incarnation, simply by understanding this, one is liberated. And that person who understands, after quitting this material body, no more he comes here, but he goes back to Godhead to become one of his associates. Such persons who knows about the incarnations, they are not impersonalists. Therefore, they do not merge in the impersonal Brahma feature, but they go to the different spiritual planets. So, Vishnustu Trini Rupani, that Vishnu, for the creation of this material world, takes into three forms, Trini Rupani. Vishnustu Trini Rupani Purushakha Annatho Vidu. And all of them are known as Purusavatar. Mahavishnu, Purusavatar, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Purusavatar, and Kirodakshai Vishnu, Purusavatar. They are called Purusavatar. Ekantu Mahatasristu, and the first Purusavatar, which is called Mahavishnu, he creates the material ingredients. which is called Mahatma. Everything requires ingredient. So, original ingredients, what is called subtle ingredients, they were created first by these Mahavishnu. Then, from the ingredients, universes were produced. And each universe, ekantam mahatam dvitiya tad annasasti. The first Purusha avatar, Mahavishnu, creates the ingredients, and the second Mahavishnu enters in each and every universe. He is called Dvitiya. And Tritiya Sarvabhutastham, and the third, he enters into the body of all living entity, Paramatma, or the Super Soul. This is the division of three, first incarnation. Ananta Shakti Madhya Krishna teen Shakti Pradhan, Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti now. Now Krishna has immense potencies, which are divided into three. What is that? Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. Ichha Shakti means his potency, whatever he wishes, that can be done. Ichha, Kriya Shakti. Then activity, Kriya Shakti. And Jnana Shakti, knowledge. Knowledge. In the Vedic literature, it is said, Parasya Shakti Vividhaiva Shyate Savabhiki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. Savabhiki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. Just like one potency is working, producing flowers. Producing flower. We are seeing that a flower is being produced automatically, so nicely painted, so nicely colored. But because we are fools, therefore we think it is being produced automatically. No, it is produced by the Kriya Shakti, by the active potency of God, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. And there is such perfect knowledge that nobody can see any defect. You see a butterfly, how it is nicely painted. You just see the duplicate in both the wings. Just like an artist paint nicely, it is painted. So we think it is coming out of nothing. This is our foolishness. Here is that is coming out of the Jnana Shakti. But his Jnana is so wide that simply by his desire, simply by his will, it can be executed. These are the things to be studied. Because we cannot see something before our eyes, that does not mean that there is no existence. There is existence. But we do not know how one is working. How one is working. Savabhiki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. Savabhiki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. Just like you see the physiological, anatomical condition of your body. Now, how this body is produced, how nicely, that every mechanical arrangement, the pipes and just like a big factory and big office, the brain is the office and stomach is the factory, and it is creating energy, it is coming to the heart and another place. That is so factory, sometimes in some place it is being some part of the manufacturing is finished, another. In this way it is going on. But it is coming out a small pea. How it is developed. In everything you can see. You take a seed, how it develops a great tree. How much potential is there? The Savabhiki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. Everything is being done. I do not know. I claim it is my body, but I do not know how even a hair is growing. I do not know. How it is replaced. I cut in the morning, and next day I say again there is. So these things are going on. Savhavajikya balakriya. We have to study God's activity in this way. There are so many things, nature study. So those who are intelligent, they can see that these things are working. What is that? Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. The three potencies of God, Krishna, is working. Ichha Shakti Pradhan Krishna, Ichha Sarva Karta, Jnana Shakti Pradhan Vasudeva Adhishthana. Now out of these three different potencies, then Krishna expands himself also to conduct or to control or to act on these three potential powers. The Ichha Shakti, willing potency, that is being controlled by Krishna himself. And Jnana Shakti, that is being controlled by his expansion, which is known as Vasudeva. Ichha Jnana Vina Naha Srijan. Without desire and without knowledge, nothing can be created. Nothing. Suppose we are manufacturing so many things. Now the manufacturer is first of all thinking, willing, that this sort of thing, if we manufacture, it will be very nicely sold in the market. That is Ichha. Then he acts on it. That is called Jnana Shakti. Without Jnana, without willing, nothing is produced. So whenever you find something produced, you must know behind that production there is that will, the supreme will, the supreme knowledge. This is study. Ichha Shakti, Jnana, Ichha Jnana Vina Nahaya Sijan, Tiner Teen Shakti Meli Prapancha Rachon. This Ichha Shakti, this potency of will, supreme will, and the potency of supreme hand, and the potency of supreme knowledge, these three things are conducting all affairs in this material world. Kriya Shakti Pradhan Sankarsan Balaram Prakita Srishti Karen Nirmal. And the potency of activity that is being done by the expansion of Sankarsana, either in this material world or in the spiritual world. So, Parasa Shakti Divibhaisya, in this way, Lord is working in so many ways, and because we have no knowledge, we think that there is no brain behind it, there is no knowledge behind it, everything is coming out automatically, and we are the master of everything. That is called illusion. So, by Krishna consciousness, you will be free from this illusion, and you will know how God is working by his different potential power. Thank you.
The following is a class from the Sri Chaitanya
in Bury Place. I was a very young, very new devotee, and I was all freshened up, ready to go into the evening artik, and Prabhupada wanted to see me. So I went up to his room. I was feeling very, very nervous, and Prabhupada says, I want you to go to Vrindavan to help build a temple. We want to build a Krishna Balaram temple. So I went with a devotee called Smarahari. We came to India on a one-way ticket. We arrived in Vrindavan. Smarahari went to Mayapur to serve there. I stayed on in Vrindavan. And things were very slow in the beginning. There were no funds. There was not even a concept for the temple, no design, and of course, the key ingredient, no cement. So you'd think, well, how is it going to happen? How is Krishna going to help us fulfill Prabhupada's desire? So Guru Kripa Maharaj, he was given the task of going to Japan with his collecting party, the Namhata. And they would work very, very, very hard and bring a lot of money back to Prabhupada. And that was the beginning of real progress in the building of the Krishna Balaram Mandir.
As the opening was approaching, Prabhupada was on top of every detail that was going on. And he put what he considered all his best men in charge of all the different areas. They were all his GBCs, and they were all the different administrators at that temple in charge of prasadam distribution, greeting guests, cleaning the temple, whatever it was. They were just his assistants. And of course this was Vrindavan, so Prabhupada wanted everything done first class. And I remember him ringing the bell so many times during the day to get this GBC, get this one, get that one, going back, and he would be checking up to make sure that they were doing everything properly, and even receiving all of his disciples. There was nothing that escaped Prabhupada's vision, his perception. I remember him saying that all the devotees, they have to have nice facility to stay. They should have this to eat. They have to have cow's milk, not buffalo milk. I mean, every detail Prabhupada covered. It wasn't just the installation ceremony. That also, he was taking care of that, but it was all the different details. He was always giving us the guidance, but it was clear that Vrindavan was his temple. He wanted to make that statement. It was very important that everything was done properly in Vrindavan.
We had gotten local Brahmins to install the deities because Prabhupada said that without them doing it, people wouldn't think the deities were really installed. This is Prabhupada at the installation. So at one point in the ceremony they had to bring Prabhupada out. I guess he was the Yajamana, or the sponsor of the sacrifice, and he had to participate in some of the rituals. You just notice how Prabhupada sits here quite, I don't know what to say, submissively enduring the ritual of the Brahmanas. He also ordered that there would be a 24-hour kirtan, and he told the devotees that the kirtan is actually installing the deities. But they're quite elaborate, the rituals. You see how they do their coconuts up the real style. Pradyumna was busy taking notes.
I've never seen a person draw something without having to erase anything. And I remember him, Surabi, he had these pencils in his pocket. And he said to me one morning, Gunanava, he says, I'm going to do the artist's conception. I'm going to draw the Krishna Balaram Mandir for the first time. I remember we were staying in these little straw-roofed huts, very, very humble dwellings. And he had a desk and a drawing board. I had an A3 sketch pad. And he opened it up and he started sketching. And his pencil never stopped. He didn't rub anything out, and it just manifested on this paper. And when he showed Srila Prabhupada that design, Srila Prabhupada beamed. I was in the room. Srila Prabhupada said, "This is wonderful." And he was so proud of it, and he was showing some guests that were also there in the room. He said, oh, this is going to be the Krishna Balaram Mandir.
Prabhupada was responsible for everything, and he pushed everyone to do as much as they could do, and sometimes beyond our own limits. And I remember Surabi, who was, in charge of it all, had to undergo a lot of chastisement. I would be getting Surabi so many times towards the end of it, the last week, and I don't know how much sleep he was getting. I know it wasn't very much. When Prabhupada would say, call Surabi, and he would tell him that this was wrong and that was wrong, and it was very intense.
In all those 2 years that all these temples were built, 2 or 3 years, there was always this pressure on time. It had to be done quickly. Everything had to be done so fast. And there was always delays, and that was a kind of a disappointment. I really did my best. I tried my best. And I think at times there was like an ego thing in me that I would feel that it couldn't be faster, but I could see that Prabhupada disagreed with me. And these were like moments that you probably make a lot of spiritual advancement, because you really got to face yourself. You're going to accept the fact that no, it is too slow, even though I could have had millions of reasons why, including there was no money, including the electricity went down, there were blackouts, whatever I would come up with. It just would not register. And Prabhupada, he would not accept that. It was like, now I have to surrender. So this was like my battle of surrender. It was always like, there is a way to do it faster, and then you have to find that out.
And I remember when all the deities were standing, they weren't on the altar yet, they were on the ground with their blindfolds on, and there was this opulent sort of hut built in the courtyard with fruits and coconuts and this whole thing, and Srila Prabhupada was over talking to a few Brahmins, I think, that were over on the side, and I'll never forget this vision. He was, it was as though he was calling on Krishna to come and enter into the forms of the deities, and there was this stream of light just coming down, and his hands were up like this, and the other people were just standing there with their palms folded, and he was saying something. I couldn't hear him because I was on the other side, but I saw that beautiful vision, and then they continued with the installation of the deities.
I went to Jaipur where the deities were being carved, and I supervised the carving of the deities, especially Prabhupada, because the carvers, they were working from photographs, often not very good. And so the man who was carving Prabhupada was having a really hard time. He was so frustrated because I kept trying to show him things and point out certain things on the photograph of Prabhupada, and they had to actually redo the whole carving at one point because some spot came up on Prabhupada's head. The sculptor finally said, "Now you do it," and he left. Because I watched him, so I kind of started learning a little bit. So I took over for a little while. Finally, the day came when all the deities were finished. And I brought the deities to Vrindavan on a train, and then a tanga, and then I took a rickshaw. This was like early in the morning, 3 a.m. or something. Just as I started entering the outskirts of Vrindavan, with all the deities in their crates, all the peacocks started crying. The hair on my head stood up from that sound. It was an amazing experience.
Nothing would stand in Prabhupada's way. This temple had to open as soon as possible. And there were many obstructions. You live in Vrindavan, you try and get things done. Everything's magnified 100 times. So if there's an obstruction, it's a big one. It's 100 times more obstructive than anywhere else in the world. But finally, through great endeavor, the day arrived.
M. Chandra Reddy was the governor of Uttar Pradesh. He comes from Andhra Pradesh originally. Prabhupada had some contacts with him. He was also a life member. Prabhupada had very specifically invited him. That was very important to Srila Prabhupada, that the governor come for the opening. And he was establishing the credibility of our movement. And Prabhupada was such a gracious host that even though he was very sick at that time, Prabhupada somehow or other completely shed all of his illness and was acting in every way as if he had had absolutely no illness. And then later in the evening he was not well again. But Prabhupada would just completely ignore his physical condition.
The first artik was going to take place, and I was in the temple room, and the temple room was packed with people. And you know how it is in India, everyone was shoving each other one way. It was like an ocean of people just going from one direction to the other, and somehow or other I found myself right in the middle, and the curtains opened. I had no idea that Prabhupada was going to offer the first artik. And it was so wonderful just watching Srila Prabhupada as he was offering the articles. He was offering them with such love and simplicity.
When the curtains opened up, I was right in front of the Krishna Balaram altar. And I was so filled with ananda, just thinking of the triumph of Prabhupada and all that went into it. So just thinking of that, tears were just pouring out of my eyes. And I just wanted to stand there and watch Prabhupada in his moment of glory and relish it.
There was just one person between me and a clear view of Srila Prabhupada, and that was Tripurari Swami. So I was standing behind him, and I did everything I could think of. I held my camera in front of him. I tapped him on the shoulder. But he was just fixated on Prabhupada offering the arti.
Vishaka wanted to take a picture, and I was blocking the view. And so she's tapping me on the shoulder, which, you know, a lady wouldn't normally do that in ISKCON. And I was a sannyasi at the time, on top of the new sannyasi. And, you know, I was hearing her, but I wasn't listening.
He remained fixed in his position, and in fact just ignored me. So I became a little bit desperate, and I put my mouth next to his ear because the kirtan was very loud. And I said loudly, "If you stand there, then you can see Srila Prabhupada offering the arti. But if you let me stand there, then the whole world will see Srila Prabhupada offering the arti."
So she got to me, and I stepped out of the way, and she took a very famous picture.
Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Vrindavan.
There's one part towards the end of the artik, he's offering the peacock fan. And as he looks out to offer it to the devotees, the smile on his face is unbelievable. It was like one who'd conquered the earth. He'd done it. He'd installed Krishna and Balaram in Vrindavan, and you could just read his face. It was full of bliss, full of happiness.
When Srila Prabhupada gave the lecture on the day of their installation, he gave the lecture in Hindi, so it would have been directed to the local guests. And he was begging forgiveness from all the personalities there for any offenses. And that struck me.
There were days of speeches by different God brothers and learned men of Vrindavan. In particular, I remember there was one speech given by Nisringa Vallabha Goswami, where Nisringa Vallabha Goswami gave extensive scriptural evidence of how persons who were not members of the Vedic culture could be elevated to the platform of Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And Prabhupada was quite pleased with that speech. It was given in Hindi, but Prabhupada gave a summary afterwards.
And the other thing I'll never forget is the quantity of pink rose petals. And there was this like abundance of pink rose petals that you were actually kind of up to our ankles on the floor. It was so special. After Mangalarti, we were all making garlands for Krishna and Balaram. And one day there were lots of broken flowers left that couldn't be used for the garlands. So I had them all in this sheet that we'd been using on top of the floor to make them in. And I took them and I showered them over Srila Prabhupada from the balcony in the guest house. And then he gave this instruction that we shouldn't waste the flowers. Srila Prabhupada was very conscious, in India particularly, of wasting the money. He knew how to protect the flowers so they'd stay fresh for longer. He told us to wrap them in damp cloths and hang them in a cold place. He knew everything about flowers, it seemed to us. But also he didn't want us to waste. Even though, practically speaking, the flowers couldn't be used, he still wanted to teach us not to waste. And he considered that showering flowers on him like the demigods in the heavenly planets a waste of flowers. So I never did that again.
The Vrindavan project was actually the very first real temple in ISKCON. This established Prabhupada so much in Vrindavan. I think he felt very good about that. Because actually Bombay was started earlier, but it was stopped because of the court cases. And I think at that time he was trying to get Bombay first. And then everything was blocked there. And Mayapur was a long-term project. It wasn't so urgent. And then Vrindavan became priority. So it only took about 2 years to build Vrindavan. Less than 2 years. Most ashrams and temples, they went very slow. When money came there, they would build something. And ours went very fast, very quickly done. And that was the same in Bombay, actually. Of course, Vrindavan had beautiful buildings, very classic buildings, but the standards were not very high in most of them. They were sort of run down a little bit, they were dark inside, and they didn't have much life, actually. And then this one was just so clean and fresh and lively, and there was just, everything was beautiful in there. And that's what people felt also when they would come to the temple. It sort of woke up Vrindavan.
There was a parade, quite an elaborate procession through the streets of Vrindavan. There was an elephant, there was a Shehnai band, and all the devotees doing kirtan. It was quite a commotion with all of this procession going through. Prabhupada seemed to be very beaming and happy. He was walking at the head of the procession, and which now that I think of it must have been quite funny for people who knew him from before. And here he is with an elephant, a Shehnai band, and all these Western disciples walking through the streets where he had walked so many times as a sadhu. And we walked quite a ways. It seemed like a very, very long walk through the city.
The procession, it was like something out of the Bhagavatam. Decorated cows and bulls, brass bands, drums, kirtan parties, thousands of people. Residents came out of their homes, their businesses, as Prabhupada walked by offering him water, flowers, and similar gifts. I remember that day I heard that Prabhupada wasn't well. The devotees wanted him to sit on a palanquin. It was a very long procession, but he refused. He walked the whole way.
They had a Rath, because that's the tradition. There's a Rath, and the spiritual master rides on the Rath, and then there's a procession. And there were hundreds of devotees. And at one point, Prabhupada decided he wanted to get off the Rath and walk with us. So when he did that, everyone just wanted to come and touch Prabhupada's feet at the same time, especially the Indian-bodied people who would come to the festival. So immediately, I think it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was there, he organized us into human chains. We locked arms on either side of Prabhupada. So we went along the procession like that, keeping people from, crushing Prabhupada.
during that procession, at times we would be farther away from Prabhupada, and at times we would be closer to Prabhupada. The farther away you got from Prabhupada, it was like being in a hurricane. It was just chaos. And as we came closer to Prabhupada, it got calmer and calmer and calmer until when we were right next to Prabhupada, it was like we were in the eye of a hurricane. I mean, it was so calm and serene, and Prabhupada was just emanating this ecstasy. And it was a stark realization, the consciousness that the empowered pure devotee had. He could change the atmosphere, not just in a room where everything was organized perfectly, but he could change the atmosphere anywhere.
Prabhupada designed Krishna and Balaram deities, the mudra. He made a drawing, gave it to Bhardraj to have it made in Jaipur. There's no Krishna Balaram deity like this, with Balaram resting his arm on Krishna's shoulders. There's no deity like that. Prabhupada made that design. And then he would joke about it. Who is stronger, Krishna or Balaram? Bala means strength. He's the strong one. And everyone would say, Balaram. And then Prabhupada said, then why Balaram is resting on Krishna? This means Krishna is stronger.
So the bank was right under the guest house. That's actually where Prabhupada's room is now, where we have Bhagavad Gita class. They opened a bank, and all the devotees crowded in, and Prabhupada was inside, and he was inaugurating the bank. And he told this joke. I was craning through the little screen window to hear what he was saying. He said, so one man heard that money attracts money. So he went into the bank and he put his money on the counter. And the teller took his money and put it in the till and said, yes, can I help you? And the man said, well, I heard that money attracts money. So I put my money there. And he said, yes, but our money has attracted your money. And Prabhupada laughed, and everyone laughed. And that was his joke that he told.
चलिए वाइंड अप करिए।